Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon to listen to the update on the Givinostat clinical trials. I hope you are all staying safe and trying to get through this quarantine, and hopefully we will see the light of day in the next few months. Today we have with us Paolo Bettica from Givinostat. He is the Chief Medical Officer, and because we're starting a little late, Paolo, I'm going to hand it directly over to you, and then we will save questions for the end of your description of the Givinostat update, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thanks
Paolo,
a lot
for
the introduction. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thank you for the time today to actually keep you updated on where we are in the development of Givinostat. If you can go to the next slide. Just to remind you that I'm a full-time employee of Italfarmaco. The Givinostat is still in development, so it's not commercially available in any part of the world, and this presentation is intended for dissemination and discussing of scientific information only. So if you can go to the next one. So the presentation today will be in three parts. The first part will be to remind you of what is the role of Givinostat in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. In the second part, I'll update you on the long-term results, so the long-term effects of Givinostat. As you probably remember, we are checking every year the evolution of the ongoing long-term safety study. And finally, to update you on the status of our clinical trials, both in Duchenne and in Becker. So if you can go to the next one. Just to briefly remind you how we are explaining the way Givinostat is working in the muscular dystrophy, both Duchenne and Becker. So to begin with, let me remind you how muscle is usually repairing itself in normal muscle. So every one of us is actually having some damages to our muscle, and when that happens, there is a repairing system within our muscle that will get rid of the damaged fiber and will replace that fiber with a new fully functional fiber. If you go to the next one. What happens in Duchenne is that on one hand, firstly, the muscle in Duchenne are actually subject to more damage than usual. And this is due to the lack of dystrophin that, as you know, is working, one of the many important role of dystrophin is on the shock absorber in the muscle. So you have more damage, but on top of that, also the muscle fibers actually have a faulty repairing system. So the repairing system is not working as it should. So as a result of that, the muscle fibers which are being damaged are being replaced not by new muscle, but actually by scar and by fat. So if you go to the next one, this is how we believe that Givinostat works. So as you probably know by now, Givinostat is not replacing dystrophin, so it's not acting at that level, but it's actually acting on the repairing mechanism. So we believe that the addition of Givinostat, the administration of Givinostat, is actually shifting the repair system back towards normality. And so as a result of that, Givinostat is reducing inflammation, is increasing regeneration of the muscle fibers, and is reducing fat and fibrosis. So if you go to the next one. So let me then move to the data that we have generated on Givinostat, and they are actually summarized in this slide, where we are on one hand summarizing the results obtained in Duchenne, and then also giving you, the key information related to the safety profile of the drug. So some time ago, we have started by testing the drug in the mouse, and as you probably recall, we have shown that Givinostat was increasing the muscle fibers in the mouse, was reducing fibrosis and inflammation, and as a result of that, there was a better performance by the animal. These results were actually replicated in the Duchenne boys treated in our phase 2 study, where after 1 year of treatment, looking at the muscle biopsy, we have shown exactly what I said before. So an increase in muscle fiber, an increase in regeneration, and a decrease in inflammation, fibrosis, and fatty replacement. Obviously, there is always a concern related to the biopsy. That is a small piece of muscle. So we wanted to check and double check these results using a macroscopic assessment. And this was actually done using MRI. And we actually confirmed the results seen at histology also at the macroscopic level. The important point regarding Givinostat is that the Givinostat is being developed in different indications. So as a result of that, we have now accumulated quite a lot of knowledge, especially in terms of potential adverse events. And these are actually listed there. So the adverse events are usually mild. The one which is kept tightly under control in our studies is platelet count, and we know that we can actually intervene quite rapidly if there is a decrease in platelets that is below the normality. And then the other adverse events which are observed with Givinostat are some GI side effects, in particular diarrhea. However, this has not led to the stop of the trial of the drug in our trial. What we are seeing recently is some increase in triglycerides, but also that is, being managed in the study by reducing and or stopping the drug temporarily. If you go to the next one. As I mentioned before, we have conducted a phase 2 study some time ago, and this was done in 20 kids that were treated with both steroids and Givinostat. And at the end of the study, they were actually allowed to enter a long-term extension. And so as a result of that, we now have kids that have been treated for more than 6 years with Givinostat on top of steroids. And so we can actually evaluate the potential effect on Givinostat on what we milestone. And we can do that by comparing the results obtained in our study with the results that have been published based on natural history data sets. And here you see on the left-hand side of the slide that have been published a couple of years ago by the Synergy Group led by Greg McDonald. They actually have shown that the Duchenne subjects which are treated with steroids delay their median their time to loss of ambulation significantly. And as you can see, looking at the red line, the median age for loss of ambulation when subjects were treated with the steroids was 13.4 years. Well, we have actually replicated the same approach with our study to look at what happens when Givinostat is added on top of steroids. And the results are shown in the right-hand side. As you can see, the median age for loss of ambulation is actually 15.2 years. So suggesting a potential delay of a couple of years to this very important disease milestone. You go to the next one. The other important parameter to look at, and now we can look at it because of the age of the boys in the study, is the effect on respiration. And as you probably recall, there are now a number of studies that suggest that some parameters like the forced vital capacity or the peak expiratory flow are expected to be reduced by 4 to 6% every year in a population comparable to the one that we have in our study. And here I'm showing the results with our patient in Givinostat. And as you can see, with regards to the forced vital capacity, the decline observed is actually 2.3%. And when we look at the test percentage, so the peak expiratory flow percentage predicted, there is actually no decline. So let's move to the following part, so where I would like to give you an update on our ongoing clinical studies for Duchenne. So if you go to the next one, the first one is actually the EPID study, which is our phase 3 study, which is ongoing in both Europe and US. This is a double-blind placebo-controlled study in boys with Duchenne. The scheme of the study is presented at the top of the slide, where you see after baseline, the boys are being randomized to the two arms. One is Givinostat and the other one is placebo. The ratio between the two is 2-to-1, so there is more chance of actually being treated with Givinostat. The treatment is lasting for 18 months, and the measurements are the standard measurement in this type of studies, so all the functional assessments which are being performed every 3 months. And on top of that, we are also looking at fat fraction at baseline, 12 and 18 months. Then at the end of the 18 months of treatment in the EPID study, all the kids will be allowed to actually go to the long-term safety study, which is called Study 51. At the bottom of the slide, some information on the management of the study. As we are, especially during the first 3 months, we are having more frequent visits to adjust and control the dose to avoid the platelet reduction. We are conducting some visits at home. So the nurses are actually going to the house of the families instead of the boys and families going to the site. We are, obviously, we understand that there is a significant traveling in this study, not only because, obviously, families and boys have to go to the clinical site, but also because we have actually concentrated the MRI in 7 specific sites in North America. So because of that, we have actually a system that provides support to traveling and reimbursement. And then, as I mentioned before, at the end of the study, of the EPID study, there will be the possibility to switch to the open label study, where obviously everybody is being treated with Givinostat up to the hopefully the marketing of the drug. So if you go to the next one, this is summarizing the criteria, the inclusion and exclusion criteria of the study. So boys that are able to walk are 6 years or older and have a genetic diagnosis of Duchenne will be screened. They will be running some functional tests, and they will be able to enter the study if they can climb 4 stairs in no more than 8 seconds, and if they can get up from the floor in a time comprised between 3 seconds and less than 10 seconds. They are required to be on a constant and stable dose of steroids for at least 6 months to be able to perform an MRI scan, and then to be able to climb the stair consistently, so there should be no more than 1 second difference between the two tests. The key exclusion criteria are listed there. Obviously, if they are participating in another investigational trial with an investigational drug, they will not be allowed, and a certain period of washout would be required if they want to enter the study. They should not be taking drugs which are known to affect the strength of the muscle. They should not have ankle contractures. Similarly, if there is a scheduled surgery soon, that is actually exclusionary for the moment. And then there are also some criteria related to the general health of the boy, like, for example, the cardiac function or the potential coexisting neurological disease. If you go to the next one, this is just a key summary of the study feature. Obviously, as for any clinical trial, the family will be asked to sign a written informed consent, and the boy will be asked to assent the study. There will be at different time points physical examination, weight and height measurement, and vital signs. ECG will be measured at almost relatively frequently in the first 3 months, if I remember correctly, every month, and then every 3 months. And echocardiogram will be taken at the beginning and at the end. The respiratory function will be measured at the beginning 12 months and 18 months. There will be blood drawn and urine sample taken at different time points, as I mentioned before, more frequently in the first 3 months and then every 3 months. Questionnaires and diary will be filled during the study. The functional testing, which you're probably very familiar with, will be performed every 3 months. And then, as I mentioned before, MRI will be done at baseline 12 and 18 months. And then with regard to the drug, let me remind you that this is an oral drug. It's a liquid suspension. And so the family will receive the suspension for the duration of the treatment until the following visit, and the boys will have to take it twice daily with food. If you go to the next one, this is a schematic of the sites. We have 15 sites in North America, which are the green dots. And the stars are actually the MRI sites, which are 7 spread throughout the North America. And as I mentioned before, at baseline 12 and 18 months, the kids are asked to go to the MRI sites for the measurement of fat fraction. If you go to the next one. So where are we with the study? Well, currently we have enrolled 160 boys, and they are in the study. As you may recall, we were supposed to perform an interim analysis in February, which we have done. This was a futility analysis, so the result of the analysis is that the study is not futile, so enrollment can continue. Part of the analysis was also to look at the sample size, because obviously the estimation that we made some years ago probably are now, if you want, superseded by the new information that we have. And in fact, as a result of the sample size re-estimation, we now can reduce the sample size to 169 subjects in the study. So, the good news is that we have only 9 subjects more to be enrolled in the study to complete enrollment.
So, Paolo, can I stop you just for, can I ask you to go back, and I want to stop you right there. I have other questions that we can look at the end, but right here, so you're going to recruit 9 more subjects to this study. And in light of the pandemic that is affecting us worldwide, how do you see that? Are you fully recruited in Europe? Are those 9 patients coming from the United States, or is it generally, are they coming from all of your sites or any of your sites? And how do you see this pandemic impacting the study visits, the data that needs to be collected, and what can you just describe how you're managing in light of this pandemic?
So if you can pause 5 minutes, I have a slide dedicated to that will give you all the answers. So
okay,
it's at the end. It's at the end of the presentation.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So if you go to the next slide. So this is. I just want to briefly describe the open label study. As I mentioned, at the end of the EPID study, the kids will be allowed to actually move to this open label extension study. And if you go to the next one, I'll give you a description. So obviously all the patients that will enter the study will receive Givinostat at the dose that will be adjusted based on their weight. The objective here is to evaluate the safety and tolerability of Givinostat during the long term. And also we will be looking at functional tests, strength, and also impact on daily activity. One important information is that the inclusion and exclusion criteria, obviously we are allowing the kids into the study once they have completed the EPID study, but also with recent amendments, if we have some kids that actually are being screened in the EPID study, they have met all the inclusion and exclusion criteria, but at the MRI, they do not fall into the in-target population. So the kids that have a fat fraction in the vastus lateralis between 5% and 30%, they actually are allowed to enter the study. So the clinical sites are now open in North America and in Europe, and soon they will be open also in UK, Israel, and Serbia.
And is there a cap in terms of numbers on that EAP? So, Paolo, you said the kids who screen but fail on the fat fraction are able to join the open label extension, if I got that right. Is there an upper limit of number? I mean, how many would you include? Are you going beyond the number of 169 boys, or is this? Can we incorporate many more boys into the EAP in the criteria?
Paolo, can I take this question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So Sarah speaking. At the moment we are open to recruit, as much passion as possible. So that means until the enrollment in study 48, so in the EPID trial will not be closed, those subjects can be, treated in the 51 study if they are in off-target group. So as you know, the MRI the baseline MRI usually will be performed in, let's say, in 4 weeks from the screening visit. So that means in that time, if we will have more patients than what we need for the study 48, we will allow those patients to be treated in study 51.
Okay, but again, do you have, if they're screening patients and they're, well, first of all, how are they going to get an MRI right now? So that I'm guessing is going to be delayed in terms of their opportunity to participate in the study or the EAP. But then do you have a cap on the number that could enter the EAP?
So usually what will happen is,
if they don't fit the study criteria.
What will happen is that when we get close to 169 patients that we described before, we will tell the sites that recruitment will stop. But however, as Sarah was mentioning, the boys who are in screening during that period, they will be enrolled.
Okay. Just that finite group. Okay,
yeah,
great.
Correct. So if you go to the next one, just a quick update on the Becker study. Go to the next one. So this is a phase 2 study, so a relatively small study to really understand whether what we have observed in the muscle in Duchenne, in the phase 2 study in Duchenne, is actually replicated also in Becker. And here the assessment will be done based on muscle histology and MRI. And also we will be looking at the standard functional test. This is a placebo-controlled study, so we have 50 patients that have been randomized 2-to-1 to placebo and Givinostat. And as you see, they are adults between 18 and 65 years of age. There are no restrictions for genetic mutation. They have to have a certain range of functional ability based on the 6-minute walk test and a cardiac ejection fraction of at least 50%. So if you go to the next one, as I mentioned before, the design is that of a placebo-controlled study, and the treatment is actually lasting for 12 months, and enrollment is now complete, and the study was actually conducted in 2 sites, is being conducted, in 2 sites, one in Italy and the other one in the Netherlands. So if you go to the next one, and this is what you were looking for. So what are we doing under COVID? Well, first of all, the clinical trials are all ongoing, so we did not have any stop in the study. However, the enrollment, so the screening and randomization part is currently paused because of the travel restriction, because of the restriction of the site, and also because most of our MRI sites actually at the moment are not allowing kids to be measured. Having said that, obviously, if there is interest in the study, please contact the clinical sites to plan for a future screening visit. Keep in mind that both in Europe and in the US, obviously, currently, most of the activities are paused, but as you probably are reading and listening on the TV set, there is now people are now starting to think more and more about reopening, although with caution. So for the boys who are already in the study, we have actually put in place different, if you want, procedures to reduce as much as possible the need to go to the site. So first of all, on-site visits have been postponed. Some of the activities related to the visit at the site are now being performed by nurses that actually go to the house of the boys, for example, blood drawing and ECG. And then also the study physician at the site is checking on the safety of the boys in the study, usually by phone. And the other thing is that we have a system in place by which we can actually ship the drug to the home of the boys if needed. And as I mentioned before, obviously it's very important that the families of the boys that are already in the study work closely with the study physician for any data and issues. One important thing which I didn't mention before, we don't have any reason to believe there are no data suggesting any interaction of Givinostat with COVID, and at the moment we are seeing no signal in that regard. So if you go to the next one, this is really to thank you all. Thank you, obviously, all the boys that are in our studies and their families, both for Duchenne and Becker. Obviously, all the sites are working there so hard to make this study happen. And finally, all the patient organizations which are summarized and represented there. If you want more information, this can actually be obtained in two ways. One is by checking on clinicaltrials.gov using the ID number that you see listed there. And the other one is actually to email to the patient's advocacy at italfarmaco.com. And by the way, Anna Christensen, who is our patient advocacy person in US, is actually online. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paolo. That was really very helpful. And there are a number of questions that have come in and a number of questions that we have. But I think we'll talk about, some of them are in the earlier studies, but let's talk about the study that is ongoing right now. And your goal is to recruit 9 more boys to that study, right, who fulfill the inclusion criteria. And at that time, when you have 9 more young boys who will fulfill that obligation, you will stop recruiting for the study. Is that accurate?
This is accurate, correct.
Okay. And those 9 boys can come from anywhere in the country that you have, or anywhere or any site, I should be more specific, so they can come to any site that is currently open in recruiting. Is that correct?
This is correct.
Okay. So I know that then once they and other boys who are being screened in the meantime, if they don't fit the inclusion criteria, are eligible to participate in the expanded access program. Do I have that right?
So if they meet all the inclusion and exclusion criteria, but do not meet the MRI criteria, then they will be allowed to go to the 51.
But this is Anna Christensen. I think that's an important point for folks to understand. If you don't meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria, then you cannot join the open label extension. And it's because a lot of those criteria have to do with the safety, and it's really important that folks be able to meet that. So it's possible that someone could do the screening visit and not qualify for the randomized trial, but then also not qualify for the open label because of some other exclusion criteria. It's only if you get through all the inclusion and exclusion and it's just the MRI results that are getting in the way, those people can participate in the open label.
Right. Thank you, Anna, because that's what I was trying to get at, because it is only that single criteria that you fail that that would enable you to join the extended access program. That's great.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. But when you have the 9 boys recruited to the study who fit all the criteria and they are in the study itself, then the study itself will shut down. So it won't be screening or recruiting any further people into the study. Is that accurate as well?
This is accurate, correct.
Okay, so the expanded access program, as you can imagine, is a really important program to people who participate in trials. They certainly give blood, sweat, and tears to participate, and the burden of participation we know is pretty significant. So I wonder if you could tell us about, I know that some of the EAP programs are up and running, others are not up and running. Can you just talk about some of the general challenges you've experienced in getting those EAPs up and running?
So as you probably have heard me saying other times, there was a key, if you want, milestone in our development. There was this futility analysis that has been passed, luckily, so we are very happy about that. And so we are now starting to, let me say, we have restarted looking at other studies to be added to our development program. So at the moment, I cannot really give you any further information, but be reassured that we are actually looking at other potential studies and other patients to be looked at in our development.
Yeah, so this is beyond the phase 3 and the extended access program. You're planning other studies, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, but in terms of the EAP, you would expect that once you get through the challenges, the EAP would be managed through the clinical sites that you have that are now up and running. Is that right? That are conducting the study itself?
As I mentioned before, at the moment I cannot really give you a definitive answer on that. We are working on that. It's likely what you say, but it's still to be defined, to be honest.
Okay. So just in the timeline of recruiting, just in your experience, I know you don't have a crystal ball on this one, but as you are working to recruit those final 9 candidates for the clinical study itself, and then we'll close down the recruitment of this particular study, do you have any guesstimate of when you might estimate that you'd have those nine individuals or 9 subjects? And the reason I ask is because some of the people online have little boys who are not yet 6 years old and may be turning 6 years old, in June or in July. So if that's the case, that they are going to celebrate a birthday in the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, do you suppose that those families might be considered eligible because you're thinking it would take a while to recruit?
So let me first make some preamble here, which is, unfortunately, we have this very tiny bug that is creating a lot of confusion called COVID. So I can really give you my best guesstimate here, but looking at the time that, so on the monthly recruitment that we have observed before COVID, and assuming that obviously we are not going to get an immediate restart in all the sites around the world once the famous phase 2 will be declared, we are expecting that it will take approximately 4 months to actually close the recruitment from the moment the site will be reopened. This is the time frame that we have in mind at the moment.
Right. So people who have little boys that are turning 6 in the next month could be eligible, and as those sites reopen, they will still be recruiting, you expect, for the next 3 or 4 months and beyond, based on the virus that we have no predictability about.
Yeah, based on what we know now, and I would say yes.
Okay, fine. And I there's so many uncertainties with the pandemic at this moment that we're all really struggling in so many ways. And this is probably a question you can't answer, so I apologize for that. But in light of the fact that the study is ongoing, you've got 160 children in there, you're collecting data, their site visits may be delayed or changed, I realize. But is your regulatory timeline still on track? And could you tell us a little bit about that plan, or if it's not, if it's a little bit difficult to comment based on the uncertainty?
So let me put it this way. We were planning to close the recruitment in June for this study, and all the timelines in terms of regulatory submission and approval were actually based on this assumption. So I believe that because of COVID and because of where we are, it's going to be extended beyond June, but hopefully it's going to be just a couple of months, and that will translate into a couple of months delay at the end of the process.
Okay.
We are still highly confident that it should have some delay, but hopefully it's very small.
Great, thank you, Paolo. And Paolo, as we see, there are certainly differences in these clinical sites and their ability to get through the IRB and get the extended access program up and running. Some sites, some IRBs are more able to do this in a quicker fashion or get through the process more quickly than others. So as these families have committed their sons to this study and are very anxious to participate in the EAP, some of them are really exploring the idea of switching to a site that has an open EAP. And so I guess my question is, we try to minimize burden on these young guys and their families. I think that's really critical. I also recognize, having completed the study, the urgency of continuing a EAP with an opportunity that you feel could slow progression, which is the thing that every single family wants the most in the whole world. So if you would switch a site from A to B and participate in that site for a period of time, and suddenly your original site is up and running, would you be able, or is there a way for you to switch back to the site that is more convenient, less travel, less burden?
So at the moment, most of the sites in Study 51, which I got confused before, but you are right. I mean, the site in Study 51, so the extend long-term study, are the same of Study 48. So most of the sites are now being approved, so they can switch directly at the same site. But we are also allowing patients in Study 48 to actually switch to another site in Study 51 if that is more convenient for them.
Great. And if they switch to a site that is open but less convenient, can they return to the site that's more convenient? I'm sorry if that feels like a confusing question.
No, I understand your point, and obviously we'll deal with that on a case-by-case, but hopefully that will not be needed. But obviously
okay.
we are understanding this issue, and so we try and make it as try and ensure that we can find the best solution also in terms of convenience. Yes.
Great, thank you. And in terms of the study itself, sorry, Anna, you were going to say something?
Sorry, Patrick. Can I just comment on
sure,
that?
Absolutely.
So you know that we had some issue with some sites for the open label extension trial. So we have been working with them very hard, and we are trying, to ask those sites to start the baseline visit at home for some subjects, and also to perform an informed consent process using a telemedicine. Having said that, they have to ask the IRB approval. So we still not have any approval in a couple of sites, which are one in Philadelphia and the second one in Gainesville. But we will keep in touch with you, and we will share with the community as soon as those sites will be open.
Yes, thank you, and we so appreciate all you're doing to do that. I know it's hard enough just in general, and then add a pandemic to it, and I can't even imagine the challenges you're facing. So we appreciate that. We also appreciate, on an individual basis, if a family is included in a different site, the consideration that they might return at some point to the site that is less burdensome and more convenient to them over time. So thank you for being so thoughtful to our families. I also had a question about the previous study and the study you reported the data on. And I guess throughout both of the studies that we're talking about, not only your phase 2, but your phase 3, are you collecting CK data on all of these patients? And I know you're not allowed to tell us right now what you're seeing, but confirm that you are or you're not collecting the CK data on these kids.
Yeah, PK data are being collected throughout the studies, correct.
No CK as in creatine kinase?
Oh, yeah. CK, yes. It's one of the standard measurements that we are taking within the lab panel, correct.
Great. Yeah, I was assuming you were, but it was a question, and I wanted to make sure that we were confirming with you. And can you tell me in the study 3, back to that study, you mentioned a number of outcome measures to include supine to standing and forced air climb. Which is your primary for the regulatory pathway forward?
It's the forced air climb.
Okay, that's your primary outcome. Okay, great. And then I'm sorry I'm skipping around. I just know that we're down to only a few minutes, so I want to try to get most of the questions in that I have and others have had. You mentioned in the Givinostat study phase 2 that their diarrhea was a side effect of this medication. I wondered does that decrease over time as the system gets used to the medicine? Have you seen a decline in that, or is that loose stools is just accompanying this particular drug?
So usually the side effect is a mild side effect, also because you are probably familiar to the fact that stipsis is actually one of the issues encountered in Duchenne. And usually it's with like every adverse event is more frequent at the beginning, and then kids get adjusted to it. And as I said, we have not had situation where because of diarrhea, patient had to stop the drug.
Okay, so that was only one patient?
Yeah, there was only one patient, but usually is managed very easily. Sometimes we may need to actually discontinue the drug for a few days. As I said, the complete discontinuation of the drug is not needed.
Okay. And the triglyceride, the liver enzyme elevations, was that significant in many patients or just a few? Did some of the kids have to stop the study based on the elevation?
So this is actually something that we have started seeing in the current study and in the study in Becker. We are seeing some elevation of the triglyceride in a number of patients. I cannot tell you the exact number because obviously we are in a placebo-controlled study, but I would say it's around 5% or something like that. And usually, I mean, in all patients is actually being managed by either straightly reducing the dose and that is enough. In some patients, we have to stop the dose for like 2-3 weeks and then restart the lower dose, and that is managed. So this is actually what we are observing. But as I said, it's another lab finding that can be managed. And let me also make another point, which is the values that we have seen are obviously higher than normal, but far away from values that usually are of concern because of, for example, pancreatitis. We don't get any close to those numbers.
That's reassuring. Thank you for clearing that up. You had a poster in Berlin when we were all allowed to get together, which feels like a long time ago. Will you be publishing those results in a journal, or do you have plans to publish that?
We are actually working on that. Unfortunately, the key author of that study is one of those wonderful doctors working in Bergamo and fighting against COVID. So I think she has more important priorities for everybody at the moment. As soon as she gets over this, hopefully also for her, we'll work on that.
Yes, well, I think the pandemic has changed so many things in our lives that it's really been so disruptive and terrifying at the same time. So can you just talk to us in our last few minutes about that phase 2 study that you have the data on? Can you just tell us a little bit more about, I think you mentioned how many patients were in that study, how long, and the data that you have over what period of time, and tell us a little bit more about the pulmonary data, if you don't mind. Yep. Can you dig into that a little bit? Okay. And I think that if you want to go back to the exact slides, it was the slides 10 and 11, 9, 10, and 11 were describing that study.
Yeah. So what we did was actually a long time ago. We started a study in 20 boys that were 7 to less than 11 years of age. They had to be on steroids for at least 6 months. They were asked to perform the 6-minute walk test to perform at least 250 meters in the 6-minute walk test. And then they were enrolled in part 1 and then part 2 of the study. Part 1 was a dose-finding part. So we started with 25 milligram dose, then escalated to 50, and then decided that the maximum tolerated dose was 37.5. This was a dose used then in part 2, which was a 1-year treatment at this dose, and the objective here was actually to look at the effect of Givinostat on the histology. So we took a muscle biopsy at baseline, at the beginning, and then a muscle biopsy after 12 months, and we compared them to look at the amount of muscle which was present in the biopsy, the amount of fat, and the amount of fibrosis. And what we saw, and by the way, this study has been published in, I believe, 2016, was an increase in the percentage of muscle in the biopsy that was highly significant, and a highly significant reduction in fibrosis, necrosis, and fatty replacement in these biopsies. And we also looked at regeneration, and we saw an increase in regeneration, and by the way, also an increase in the satellite cells. You may all recall that there is a concern that there is exhaustion of satellite cells. We actually have not seen that, but exactly the opposite. And then, as I mentioned before, these boys were allowed to continue the study. So we have had a total of 3 extensions to the study. And so now every year we are reporting on the effect of Givinostat on disease milestones. And the graph that you see here is what we are observing now after more than 6 years of treatment, where if we compare to natural history, we see a delay in the median age of loss of ambulation. And then in the following slides, we have been looking at the respiratory parameter, so the forced vital capacity and the PEP. And also here, compared to the published data, we are seeing less progression of the disease. In the FOC, we are talking about a cut of 50% in the yearly decline. And actually in PEF, we are not seeing any decline.
This is really wonderful, and I'm so glad that you've at least believe and have learned through your study that the satellite cell population is not exhausted. I think that's been a worry for all of us about getting more turnover in the satellite cells, and so that's very good news. And thank you for updating us about this study. It really does look promising to all of us, and we're very excited and thankful that we're going forward. In spite of pandemic, we could use good news, and certainly this is good news today. Paolo and your team, you've been really wonderful. Thank you for working with us and working hard to get these EAPs open. I think as a community, we truly do believe it takes a combination of therapies to stop progression, which is our dream and our hope. And I think this looks very promising to our community. So we certainly thank you for your time today. There aren't any other questions, but I think you've done a very nice, comprehensive job of presenting this to us. So please keep us updated. We'll look forward to making sure that the site visits are hopefully accounted for, and the boys continue to do well, and look for a regulatory path forward. So thank you for joining us, and thank you all on the phone for joining us. Please, all of you, stay safe. I hope the quarantine is lifted to some degree in a safe way for all of us, and certainly for our sons. Thank you for joining us, and good night.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.